here we go. Good morning. This is the second second session in June for the DBA Fundamentals chapter. Today we have Joey D'Antonio speaking about the new features that are available, all the enterprise features available with SQL Server 2016 Service Pack 1. So I'm really interested in this. I've got a few other things to go over first, so I'm going to do those real quickly, and then we'll get to Joey. Okay. As part of all of this, all the free education we bring and the prizes we give away, our sponsor helps support that and helps make that possible. Our sponsor is SentryOne. They have a lot of great things. Please go to their site and try out some of this stuff. Let them know that you came from us or any of the other chapters. It doesn't matter. But they have great articles. They have great blogs. They have great videos that go over different things. Plan Explorer is a great thing to download. If you are dealing with execution plans at all, this thing is so much simpler to work with than Microsoft's basic stuff. They will even answer things if you ask for performance. So it's a great site to go to, and of course they sell products too, and it's a great product, but there's tons of free stuff to look at. Let's see. We've went over our stuff before with our new website names, dbafund.org and dbafundtube.com, or .org, I think. I think we got all of them. This is pretty big. July the 23rd is coming up for people that want to save money going to PASS. That will be the last big jump in price before they go to, I think they're going to go up $300 or $400 from $18.95 after July the 23rd. So if you're going to go, do it before the 23rd. We also offer what we think is a fantastic deal that I don't think anybody else does. We give away a $500 Amazon gift card for everyone that uses, not everyone that uses it, but a drawing for one person from everyone that has used our discount card. Now, in the past, the most we've ever had was 54 people using our discount code. So the chances are pretty good that you've got a chance to win something. I mean, we're going to give away our $350 Amazon gift card in a few days from the people that have attended sessions in the last 3 months, but that's a couple of thousand people. So anyway, there's our discount code, VC15GBQ6. And I guess I could start from current slide. If you're going to sign up, go ahead and sign up pretty soon, or at least before July the 23rd. It might take you a while to get your company to approve it. And if you're a first-timer, please say that, because we get a certain amount of money for every first-timer that signs up, and that helps pay for some of these prizes we give away too. We have also, with every 20 people that sign up, we will be able to give away a free session. We've given away 5 sessions of 6 that we've earned in the last 2 years. We did use one ourselves, but we try to give them away to people. We think that's like a $2,000 thing. That's pretty nice. So anyway, please sign up. Here's some of our sessions coming up. SQL Server Performance Tuning Made Easy with Panal Deve in July, and Grant Fritchie in July. Those are 2 awesome speakers. And Warner Chavez with Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and Jez Borland with Not So Secret Get to Know SQL Server Agent. These are all great speakers. You need to sign up for them. PASS has multiple virtual groups that have multiple languages and multiple topics. Go to let's see the website, but it's anyway. Go to PASS's website and you can find it and drill down, join the session, join the chapters, and see lots of great educational content, free. If you go to your local chapter too, if you've got one fairly close by, usually the local chapters will do the local SQL Saturdays, and these are one-day sessions that have multiple speakers, new and great speakers that have been out there for a long time, and then a lot of new speakers that'll be giving great sessions free of charge. You usually have to pay for your own lunch, and that's about it. Go to SQLSaturday.com and see if there's one close to you. These are the ones that are coming up. That one's this weekend in Chattanooga. That one looks pretty good for me. So anyway, our sessions will be recorded and usually up within a day or so. You can get to them at our meeting archive site, or you can go to dbafundtube.org. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is signups haven't been as good since they've changed to the new format, which is you have to sign up for sessions through our website. It's not too hard. Just if you go to www.dbafund.org, it gives you all the sessions. You have to join PASS, though. That's the big thing. You have to join PASS, and then from there you can sign up for our sessions, and that's probably slowing things down. But after that, you don't get you maybe get one or two emails every once in a while, but not that much. But give that a shot. Okay. Joey D'Antonio has been around IT for quite a while. He's known for working with a lot of different platforms, specialized in SQL Server. He works with a variety of platforms, Oracle, Hadoop, and he's one of usually he and Denny at Denny Cherry and Associates, great company by the way, are out there. They're almost like trailblazers that try out the newest features and dig into it and understand what's happening. Of all things, Denny is the expert when Microsoft changes their licensing. So they really get out there and try to ferret out the new things that are coming out and understanding, and they start using this stuff early, and that's why they jumped on this. But anyway, Joey's a great speaker. He's talented across a lot of different areas, and I'm going to he will be giving us the slides, and there's a lot of slides at the end that he's not going to have time to go over. But anyway, I better go on so I can transfer it to him. Over to you now.
Thanks.
I changed the presentation. I'm sorry I was slow.
No problem. No problem. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone, and welcome to SQL Server 2016 SP1, all the features, standard edition. So one of the most common complaints I've had throughout my career, especially for people who work in smaller organizations, is standard edition. Standard edition has always lacked a lot of features that Enterprise Edition has, and it's always been problematic, especially for DBAs and developers who have been trying to learn some of these kind of advanced features that may not exist in all the editions. So starting with SQL Server 2016 Service Pack 1, Microsoft has released almost all of the features into Standard Edition, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about which features are not there. Hang on 1 second, let me kill something. I have a remnant on my screen that I'm trying to get rid of real quick, and let's see if we can get it to go away. Okay, perfect. So like Steve mentioned, I'm Joey D'Antonio. You can find me on Twitter at jdanton. I blog at joeydantoni.com. I'm a data platform MVP, I'm a VMware expert, etc. I like to talk about data. So let's get started. So this, for the most part, and Steve mentioned that Denny and I do a lot with licensing, and we both worked in very large enterprises for a decent amount of time, so I think we both have a lot of experience with doing licensing on a very large scale. So things got a little bit simpler with 2016. So Microsoft eliminated that Business Intelligence Edition, and then the only other real big change for 2016 was that Developer Edition became free. So anything that was a non-production workload, you could use Developer Edition. This wasn't always the case in the past, and now it is. The other big difference is with SP1, we have a common set of features. And what exactly does that mean? We're going to cover this in detail in the next few slides, but basically Microsoft wants to have one common development platform That doesn't mean standard edition is exactly the same thing as enterprise, but anything that's like T-SQL footprint type things, so like partitioning, compression, uh, always encrypted, these features are available across the edition. So whether you're using Standard Edition, Express Edition, Azure SQL Database, SQL Server Enterprise, all those features will be available to you. So let's go through that and understand what the other differences are. The other thing we're going to kind of talk about today is that there are a lot of other performance enhancements that the product team made in SP1. So even if you're running SQL Server, Enterprise and you're running 2016, there's a whole lot of reason to go to SP1, both from a performance and a usability perspective. So we're going to talk through that here. So lots of other features, a couple that I left off. In-Memory OLTP, Hackathon, as we like to call it, is available now in Standard Edition. As is column store indexes. So column store indexes are a really big thing if you're building a data warehouse. The nice thing about having them in these smaller edition or lower editions like Standard Edition, you can maybe take advantage of those on a smaller scale. If you just have a couple of tables that would really benefit from that type of index, that's excellent. If you want to use R or Python, those features have been included in Standard Edition. That one's not so much new for SP1, that was there. Likewise, Polybase. Always encrypted is really the big security one. That's Microsoft's new big security feature. It's relatively easy to implement. If you've ever worked with cell level security in the past, always encrypted similar to that, except the key is not stored in the database. The key is stored in your application. And basically that means the DBA can never see the data, adding another layer of security into the process. So the reason, Steve kind of asked me earlier, why did Microsoft do this? And I think it ties to a lot of things. You may have noticed, or if you're new to this, you may not have noticed, but Microsoft traditionally was especially under their former CEO, Steve Ballmer, was a very closed company and very sales-oriented, numbers-driven. Microsoft under Satya Nadella, the new Microsoft as we like to call it, is very engineering-driven. And what that meant is they wanted to, and I think this kind of ties into a cloud model, they want to charge for scalability and not for features. So they want to have features be pretty much the same across the board and charge for scalability. Does that mean every feature is going to be there? No, they're not. I'll warn you on that. Most of the development features are. There are still some gaps, and we'll talk about. But the big thing is this common programmability surface area across SQL editions. Microsoft wants particularly the software vendors of the world, the people that make those third-party applications that we have to tune, to be able to develop one set of application code and to take advantage of the features that are in SQL Server to build better applications. So even if those vendors are selling to customers who run on Standard Edition, Microsoft wants them to be using features like always encrypted and column store and in-memory. And one of the ways they know this is Microsoft collects telemetry now. And you may have heard or read about it places. They're not doing anything nefarious. They're not going to come after you for licensing stuff based on what they see in your telemetry. But they're collecting this data, so they know what features people are using, and that's pretty important information from a development perspective for them, because they can understand what features they're using. They know what features are really good and what they'd rather see. So by having this common programmability surface area, it means it's easier for vendors to take advantage of those advanced features and build them into their application. So the optimal design, you can feel free to deploy the same application to any SQL Server edition. And you get your choice of edition based on performance, scalability, and availability requirements. So those are really where the costs come in. In here, if we look at these features, all these features at the bottom came into SP1 in Standard and Express edition. So we see change data capture, database snapshots, column store, partitioning, compression, in-memory OLTP, always encrypted. That Polybase is a little bit of an error on this slide. Polybase was available in Standard at RTM of 2016. Fine-grained auditing, and then multiple file stream containers. So all of these things are now available across all these editions. This is a pretty powerful slide just to see the amount of change. And even I wrote a blog post on this right around the time 2016 RTM. Like 2016 RTM didn't suck in terms of new features on Standard Edition. Microsoft added a bunch of new features. So when you look at SP1, there's a ton of new features that are available. So this is really kind of incredible. And if you're a developer or even a DBA, you should be excited about this because features like compression, a lot of times compression can really drive down your I/O. And if you're a smaller organization and you don't necessarily have fast storage, that can be of real benefit. The other thing I'll say is I think some of these things are driven a little bit by Azure, but not 100%. But if you look at Azure SQL Database, Microsoft Database is a service offering. All these features were always in every edition, with the exception of column store and in-memory, were in every performance tier of Azure SQL Database. So I think it's kind of Microsoft standardizing everything, but you win. So in-memory OLTP, there are some limits. In Standard Edition, the memory is located to a quarter of the edition buffer pool memory limit per database. So this means you get a quota per database on Standard Edition of potentially 32 gig. So that means if you happen to be using in-memory OLTP, you could really scale out your memory pretty far into what you could do per database using in-memory OLTP. If you're not familiar with in-memory OLTP, it's just people think, oh, memory, it's automatically fast and it's just tables stuck in memory. It's not really. It's its own unique kind of table structure that really benefits workloads that are bound by latching. So particularly if you have a very high throughput OLTP application, this can be a pretty good benefit to you. And you can see more about it on this blog and how it works in Standard and Express Edition. There's still a bug or two around this, but in general it works. I think that the one bug is you really don't want to blow out your storage area for in-memory in Standard Edition because there's some ugly process to fix it, like having to reinstall or something like that. Column store, this is one of my favorite features as well. This is, if you're not familiar with this is a special type of index that's used in mainly in data warehouse and analytic workloads. But what column store is, it's basically takes a table, flips it on its side, and stores the data in columns. There's a great deal of compression that it gets, and it also only needs to scan the columns that are used by a query. So for example, if you had a fact table in a data warehouse that had 50 columns in it, and you only needed to return, say, 5 of those 50, when you run that query, the query optimizer is only going to return those or scan those 5 columns. So it's a very efficient way. There's a memory limit associated with this, and this is twofold. Column store uses its own cache, so it's separate from the buffer pool. So you have a memory limit of 32 gig per instance in this case, not per database. Also, you have a max degree of parallelism of 2 with Standard Edition. If you're using Enterprise Edition, max stop will scale. This says unlimited, but realistically it will only scale to 64. Text aggregate pushdown is not available, but indoors filter pushdown and SIMD, which is a special type of CPU instruction, is also not supported in Standard. But the concept of indexes are and this, if nothing else, can be very good for like letting you experiment with them, seeing how it works with your workload. Or frankly, if you're using archival data, it's really the best kind of compression you can get. So if you're just trying to archive data in your Standard Edition instance, this can be another good approach for it. So if we look at this standard feature, so Express Edition is still designed for small scale applications. It does have development and management tools. You can back up and restore to Azure. Standard Edition is really designed for mid-tier apps and data marts, but you do have all the security features. So you have always encrypted, in-memory, basic reporting. So we're not going to talk too much about BI, but I'll make some mentions. When we talk about basic reporting, reporting services does not include the mobile BI piece. That's enterprise only. Basic analytics. So the big difference is your R packages are mostly open source. hybrid scenarios like stretch database and backup. The big difference with enterprise, you get higher availability. So we're going to talk about always on availability groups. There's more support for always on and better support. You have more memory for things like column store. You have online index rebuilds. You have TDE and a few other things. So, but from a programming perspective, everything's going to be the same. So here, when we talk about always-on availability groups, standard edition, the big difference here is standard edition only gives us one replica, and we can't read it. And it can be synchronous or asynchronous. In this case, we're showing synchronous, but it can be an async replica. And this is only done effectively at the database level. So the easiest way to think about standard edition always-on availability groups is it's just database mirroring wrapped in an availability group because it's a single database at a time. Whereas with an always-on availability group in Enterprise Edition, you can have multiple databases in that availability group. Your secondaries are readable. Multiple databases can fail over together as a group. Excuse me, I clicked too fast there. Multiple databases can fail over as a group, and you can have up to 8 secondary replicas. So you can build that as a large-scale scale-out solution. Data warehousing and data marts. So both of these work pretty well. So we have Polybase in both of these, which is going to allow us to connect SQL Server to Hadoop, and more importantly, Azure Blob Storage. So, when you're connecting to Azure Blob Storage, you can do a lot of interesting things like archiving, because we have this concept of external tables. Enterprise is designed for Polybase and a scale-out configuration. That is not something I've run into yet. Somebody asked about temporal tables. I'll take that question in a bit. There's a scale-out read-only analysis services configuration. So large-scale analysis services, advanced data mining. Data mining is an analysis services feature that has remained only available in Enterprise Edition. The other big different change to 2016 with Standard Edition with BI is that analysis services tabular became available in Standard Edition. There is a limit. I think you can have 16. Your cube can be 16 gig compressed. So realistically, given like 3 to 4 to 1 compression ratio, you're looking at about 40 gig of data, but that is available to you if you need it. So enterprise security. The only feature that is now enterprise only is transparent data encryption. And transparent data encryption being part of Enterprise Edition kind of stinks because a lot of people do have an audit requirement of securing their data at rest. Here's the thing I'll say about it: if you're stuck with this and you're on Standard Edition and you're grumpy about this one thing, 2 things. Starting with SQL Server 2014, you can encrypt your backups independently of what edition you're on. So backup encryption with 2014 became independent of TDE. Also, for the most part, most storage vendors, and definitely Azure, and I know Pure does it, and I'm not sure about all the other vendors, but most of the major vendors do this. You can just encrypt your volume. So with that, the main goal of TDE is making sure nobody can take a copy of your database from storage and restore it or apply it to another database server. If you encrypt at rest on your storage, you have that same benefit. Everything else is available in all editions. So always encrypted. Always encrypted is a really great feature that lets you keep your data encrypted across the environment. Row level security, which is something we've been asking for forever, was included in 2016 from the start. Dynamic data masking, less of a security feature and more of a presentation layer feature, is also available. And auditing, fine-grained auditing. So this was something that was, for the longest time, Microsoft said, if you didn't spend enough money, you couldn't get a high level of auditing. Now you can. Once again, I think that's a change that's driven by Azure SQL Database, right? Because you had auditing available to you if you're a customer of Azure SQL Database. So it was only fair for them to make it available on Standard Edition. So somebody asked, can you explain the difference between standard and enterprise edition with respect to reporting services features? Quickly, the two differences are data-driven subscriptions are only available in standard in enterprise edition, and then mobile reporting, which is new for 2016, is also only available in enterprise edition. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. The one thing I'm not sure about is if you need enterprise edition for reporting services scale out. I'm guessing you do, but I don't know that one off the top of my head. So here's our pricing and licensing summary. Standard is per core and server plus CAL. Enterprise is per core. You still, if you have software assurance, you get a free secondary. Here's something else I'll tell you is to make a recommendation for your organizations. You really want to make sure you buy software assurance now. It's for all sorts of reasons, but frankly, Microsoft doing a release almost every year now, or even every 2 years, it's totally worth it to do it. So you have upgrade rights, and so your licenses continue. Also, there's that free secondary makes it a nice to have. And SQL BI edition died. That was the other thing. I don't think they sold a whole lot of that. So what's not in standard edition? Here's some of the enterprise edition only features, and this kind of covers back to that question. Advanced R integration. So parallel and streaming, not memory bound and processing. I know probably a ton of you aren't using R. Since this is fundamentals, I'll cover R a little bit. It's R as a statistical language that became integrated with SQL Server 2016. I don't think it's that broadly used, but that is not available. Standalone R server, which is just R without SQL Server, not available. Master data and data quality services still remain enterprise edition features. Resource governor and IO resource governor. These are two pretty big things. So, but once again, these aren't programming features, right? So these are scalability things. When you're using resource governor, you're trying to give your server better scale. You're not necessarily trying to change your code or anything like that. So both really cool features, both enterprise edition. Partition table parallelism. So if you partition a table that runs in parallel, you can still do partitioning in SQL Server standard, but not in parallel. NUMA. So if you're not familiar with NUMA, it stands for non-uniform memory architecture. Typically, most servers are going to have 2 banks of memory in SQL Server, or 4 in some cases. And SQL Server is aware of which pages are in which bank of memory and will assign OS schedulers to the CPUs that are nearest that memory for performance. That's an enterprise edition only feature. That's fun fact. That's one I did not know until 2016 came out. I actually had to ask Connor about it. Online index operations is a pretty big one. Parallel DBCC, CheckDB, that's still only enterprise edition. Utility control point might be the most useless feature that Microsoft ever introduced. It was in 2008 RQ, and I knew of like 2 people who used it, myself being one of them. But yeah, that I don't think anybody really uses that. Analysis services, so the big things here are direct query storage mode for tabular, write back dimensions, and data mining. In reporting services, to answer the person's question, so I was right on scale out, data-driven report subscription, custom branding. I'm not sure what they mean by Power View there. I think that probably involves SharePoint deployment. And the whole reporting services thing got screwy with the new Power BI licensing, so that's kind of a different discussion. And somebody had a good question around always-on availability groups. Let me go back to that real quick. If I can find it. So if you're planning to use always-on availability groups for DR, is it possible to use standard edition for this, but still have local high availability? It looks like standard limits you to 1 replica, but is it possible to have a cluster for local HA, but use always-on availability groups for DR? Trying to see if there's a scenario to save dollars but have DR and local HA. So to answer your question, you could do that. You could have like a standard edition 2-node cluster, 2-node failover cluster instance, and then sending out to an always-on availability group replica in your secondary. You obviously won't be able to have automatic failover to your readable secondary there, because that health check runs at the same level as the cluster health check. The other big thing there is you're going to have to pay to license that DR secondary. So if you had software assurance, the second cluster node would be free that you'd have, but you'd only get that one free one for that one paid one. You'd have to pay for the secondary. There are some other limits to DR, so just be aware of those. But that should work. But yeah, you definitely want to investigate and build it out and understand what's going on. So availability, manageability, and security that are only in Enterprise Edition. So like we were just talking about, the big ones always on availability groups, up to eight secondary replicas, including 2 secondary replicas. Standard Edition limited to 1 non-readable secondary. Online page and file restore, so that's another pretty big one. Online index operations, so index rebuilds and reorgs to be online is only Enterprise Edition. Fast recovery is Enterprise Edition. Hot add memory and CPU in virtual environments where you may add memory and CPU live. That's also available. The big one here is TDE. Like I mentioned, if you have a requirement for encryption at rest, there are a bunch of other ways to do this without using TDE. I kind of prefer to do them anyway because I really don't like having my TempDB encrypted and taking that performance hit. Peer-to-peer transactional replication is only available in Enterprise Edition. If you're using peer-to-peer transactional replication, I'm sorry. It's a really, really hard feature to use, and it's frequently misconfigured. So just be aware of that. Change data capture for Oracle and a couple of these advanced transforms for IS. So let's start talking about engine enhancement. And the cool thing about this is we can stop talking about licensing and just start talking about performance. Let me go back and take that one question around temporal licks. I know I don't have anything on that, and now it's kind of and I think we lost it. So whoever typed that temporal question, I believe the question was, is there a fix for on-delete cascade in the base tables? And I don't think there is. I don't know when that's coming. It's a little bit complicated, is my understanding. So we're going to talk about engine feature enhancements. The team was busy. And fun story, we're going to have a demo here. But I was trying to set up the demo this morning, and I was playing around on my laptop, and Denny and I were sitting next to each other because we're in an office today, and I was like, man, I'm not seeing the things I should be seeing in this execution plan for SP1. And then I quickly looked at my build, and I looked at SQLServerBuilds.blogspot.com, which is a site I like to recommend because it's got a complete list of all the versions of SQL Server and their version numbers. And I'm like, crap, I'm not on SP1. What happened about a month ago is my Windows VM had some major problem, and I had to roll it back to a backup. And I uninstalled SQL SP1 when I did that. So today's demos will be featuring SQL 2016 pre-SP1, so I can show you what the differences are. But then the new demos are actually going to be in SQL 2017 on Linux because that's what I had handy. So let's get started with some of these. So a few things that are here that the show plan was extended in SQL Server 2016 to help us with. So it's going to expose the max memory that's enabled for the query. Memory fractions for this optimized nested loop join. Information about enabled trace flags. It'll show us what trace flags are enabled. And if SQL Server gives us a memory grant warning that it thinks a memory grant's going to spill out to TempDB, it'll take care of that warning. So more stuff in query plans, which is always nice. There's also information about parameters and data types, CPU and execution plan, execution elapsed time for the entire query, so kind of like when you do set statistics time. And here's my favorite thing, and Bob Ward was the first person who told me about this, and I was blown away when I saw it. you get the weights for your queries. And this is obviously only in an actual execution plan, not estimated. But you can see what your query weighted on, which to me is absolutely fantastic. I'm really, really happy. What's Microsoft doing here? They're making your job for tuning and troubleshooting a lot easier. So when you're trying to understand what's happening in a query plan, this is going to simplify your life tremendously. We also get per operator performance statistics for nodes and threads, so lots of good insight that we didn't have before. And show plan is extended to include runtime counters per thread, so we can see the input memory grant, the output memory grant, the use memory grant. One of the other new things I saw was estimated rows read, so getting more information there. And we get node costs for parent and children. So we get cumulative values for row mode operators, and for batch mode operators, you get singleton values. So you get they're different depending on what you're using. And so, a couple of things I kind of want to talk about here that's really exciting about this. So some of the smart tuning query tuning stuff that you may have heard about that's in SQL 2017 is starting to build on some of this data. So Microsoft is collecting more data, both around, in and around execution plans and in and around the query store, which is a really fantastic feature in 2016. And they're collecting that data to try to build some intelligence so that the query optimizer can both make better decisions and make more dynamic decisions based on the history of that query. So they're doing some really, really neat stuff that's going to make our jobs as DBAs a lot easier. So here we see our runtime information, and I'll walk through a demo of this later, but we see the actual logical reads, the actual physical reads. This is all things you used to have to capture separately. You still can capture separately, but the query plan captures it for you. And one thing I'll kind of warn you about, and Steve mentioned our sponsor, SentryOne. Man, they have a great tool called Plan Explorer. Like Steve mentioned, it captures a bunch of stuff that's not available in just the regular query plans, or just makes it easier to read and understand. It's also free, like completely free. That is not a paid tool, so I would highly recommend using it. I'm going to be using Management Studio today, but this makes it easier to read, because a lot of this information is not necessarily exposed in the graphical query plan you might be used to looking at. It's only exposed in the XML plan, which, let's face it, it's a little bit harder to read. XML is not the easiest thing to quickly glance at and be able to identify. In here we see in our properties on our query plan, we can see our actual I/O statistics, our actual logical reads, our actual physical reads, and et cetera, our scans. So very cool stuff. We see which thread in our parallel query did what and how many rows it returned. So very, very interesting statistics. We can also get per operator level performance stats. There's a new extended event, and if you're not familiar with extended events, I recommend going back through the archives and checking out Aaron Stelato's session in the archives on extended events. Extended events are very similar to SQL Profiler, just more advanced. We can query thread profilers. So here we can identify what was going on in those individual process threads that we're reading during our query, what they were doing, how many reads, how many writes, etc. So one of the other things we get is the ability to detect some predicate search inefficiencies. So typically the actual number of rows are returned after the predicate is applied, not the actual number of rows that are scanned. So if a scan or a seek only returns 10 rows, why is it taking so long? You may see high CPUs or many logical reads, but the query plan doesn't typically reflect that. So now what do? Now we have this predicate pushdown. So we see actual rows and result set, 39. The actual number of rows read, 113,443. So in that case, we can tell why something sucked. So here we see the estimated number of rows, and this would be what we'd see in SQL 2014 in our operator properties. Now we see the number of rows read to give us that actual number of rows. So, and then So that was a SQL 2016 enhancement. With SP1, we see the estimated number of rows to be read. So this is something else that can show us, how up to date our statistics are, in whether or not things are good or bad, etc. Another nice feature. So in the past, if we wanted to use a trace flag in a query, or certain types of query hints, we had to be sysadmin. This is really problematic if you're talking about developers trying to write their own code. Now we have some of these use hints, and we still have to be sysadmin to do trace flags, but some of these other hints have been converted into regular hints so that they don't require you to turn on a trace flag. So instead of doing query trace on 9481, you're simply saying use hint force legacy cardinality estimation, which in the past was trace flag 9481. So 9 different hints were supported and enabled to enable this functionality, which was previously only trace flaggable. If you're not familiar with trace flags are kind of like the closest thing I can use to describe them, if anyone's ever worked with Oracle, they're kind of like init.aura parameters. If you haven't worked with anything else, it's kind of like just a code setting that tells SQL Server to behave a certain way. There are a large number of them that are documented. There are hundreds more that are undocumented. But those tell SQL Server what to do and how to behave. And it's basically SQL Server's code kind of goes, if trace flag 1, 2, 3, 4 enabled, go ahead and do this behavior, as opposed to the standardized behavior. And you can use sys.dm exec valid use hints, and let's take a quick look at that DMV. Excuse me, I was trying to copy there. Sorry, fighting my computer for a second. Let's go ahead and take a look at this DMV. And like I mentioned, I'm actually demoing on 2017, but I think this is the same. So here you see disable optimization nested loop, force legacy cardinality estimation, enable query optimizer hotfixes. That was trace flag 4199. Disable parameter sniffing. Enable histogram amendment for ascending keys. And you can force default cardinality estimation. So big differences, you don't need to be SA for those. There's also 3 new memory grant show plan warnings. 3 conditions. So this is an excessive grant. So this is when max used memory is too small compared to the granted memory. And this can cause blocking and less efficient usage when large grants exist and a fraction of that memory was used. You can also see when a query used more memory than was granted. That scenario can cause out-of-memory conditions. Also, you can see when a grant increased. So when a dynamic increase starts to increase too much, based on the ratio between max memory and initial request memory, and this can cause instability and unpredictable workload performance. So this one's in 2014 SP2, and some of these optimizer fixes have been backported, not all of them. We're going to talk about clone database, which is another one. But this is an 2014 SP2 and 2016 SP1. This was something that got added in 2014 with 2016 Management Studio, is to be able to have live query estimates, live query statistics. When this came out in 2016, you had the ability to see a live query execution plan. I believe 2014 also had the metadata there to run it, but it was very expensive to run. It was I'll have a table in this slide in a second that'll show you what the cost was in terms of performance, but it was quite expensive. Now it's a little bit better. You can also view the live query statistics from other sessions, for example, Activity Monitor, by enabling the query post-execution show plan X event. Data is stored in a DMV, which is not highly scalable for widespread use. before SP1. So here, this is what our query execution statistics looked like. With no active X events, the overhead percentage for 2014 was up to 93%. With 2014 SP2, 2016, 62%. Now with 2016 SP1 down to 14.3. So it's not still something you exactly want to turn on in prod, but it becomes a little bit more usable if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem query. Here's another one, database cloning. So this is a schema-only copy of the database for testing and or troubleshooting purposes. This first came out with 2014 SP2, but it's called DBCC Clone Database. In 2014 SP1, the big enhancement for this is it supports CLR objects, in-memory tables, in the query store. So we can copy the query store from one database to another. Unfortunately, we can't use this for prod yet. It's because there's still some mainly issues with IDs, but this is available and we do have it handy. Not supported for production database, but this is fast and easy. Pretty cool technology that's part of SQL 2016 or 2014 going forward. So we simply do a clone database to clone all this, and here I'll do a demo of this in a second. We can copy it with no statistics, or with schema and statistics and no query store, or just a schema only clone. So let's take a look at this. Let me copy my code here. I want to show a couple of things while we're demoing. So let's go ahead and clone. And this will go pretty quickly. I hope. I say that and it's taking a little while, but see if we're getting any messages. Does anybody have any questions while we're waiting for that to go?
No questions so far, Joey. Just a lot of people asking for your slides. That's all.
Cool.
Yeah. I will say we will try and get them up as soon as we can after the session.
Yeah, and I'll get them sent out. Let's go ahead and kill this because I don't know why it's taking so long. So here we're going to run a query. I'll show you the live query statistics first, just so you can see that if you haven't seen it before. This query is going to run in like 5 seconds, so it's not going to be too exciting. But if you look carefully, you can see the data flow. Let's see if we run it again. No, it's going to. Yeah, that ran pretty fast, but you can see the percentages there. But let's go ahead and capture an actual execution plan because that's where we'll really get this compelling information. So first thing to note, here we can see the. And I zoomed in and lost it. But we see we have the actual number of rows read is the same as actual number of rows. We see our estimated number of rows. So if we look at our clustered index seek here, we see our estimated number of rows read and our actual number of rows read. So my statistics are pretty up to date. But then if I go into my execution plan, I see that I have the same thing. But let's look at the XML because there's some stuff I want to show you there. So here we see our degree of parallelism. We see all of our memory grant info. We see all the trace flags that I have on, and man, I have a lot of trace flags on in this database. I don't know what I'm doing there. This is Linux, so maybe they have them on by default. So I see all my trace flags on. I see my estimated CPU and my estimated I/O for my query. I see what my subtree costs are. So lots of really good information here. And then this is where Plan Explorer can help you parse this information a little bit. If I do a find on weight, I'm not seeing my weight stats here, but trust me, they're there. There are statistics info. So lots more information in your query plans. So I highly recommend kind of reading up on this and playing with Plan Explorer, because Plan Explorer will show this a little bit more explicitly, so you don't necessarily have to dive in through this XML in order to gather this information. I did save the best for last. This is my favorite feature in SQL Server in like 10 years. Create or alter. So we can finally create or alter support to make it easier to modify stored procedures, triggers, UDFs, or views. Unfortunately, we can't do it with tables and indexes yet because that's a different deployment mechanism. It's a little bit more complicated. And there are two very different commands. So that will probably be a while for Microsoft to fix, but at least for non-tabular objects in your databases when you're doing deployments, this makes life a lot easier because you have one set of code. So SQL Server 2016 SP1 has a ton of new features. Take advantage of them. They're really cool. There's a lot more information that'll make your life easier. Clone database is really handy, especially for developer environments. To me, that feature is a huge developer enhancement. If you're a DBA, you can take advantage of your enhanced query plans. The other thing, if you're a DBA who's only ever worked on Standard Edition, you want to start looking at things like compression. Compression is a really fantastic feature on it. I spoke on it at Past Summit, I believe, in 2013, whenever it was in Charlotte, which I think it was. You can see that talk. Compression hasn't changed that much since then. It's a pretty comprehensive talk on how compression works and how it can benefit you. Compression is one of those features as a DBA you can turn on without having to really tell your devs about it, and you can get better performance. So that's a really cool feature because it doesn't require code change on their part. And it can help your performance. You also, if you're a dev, you have the option to do things like always encrypted for better security. Lots of other development features, partitioning. Be careful with partitioning. You probably don't need it, but have some really good understanding around partitioning before you deploy that. But compression, column store, in-memory, all sorts of new things that are available. The big thing here is Microsoft wants to offer common development platforms. The other thing I'll tell you about to make sure you're doing is make sure you're staying on top of your Management Studio rollouts, because especially like those query plan operators, if you're not on a newer version of Management Studio, you're not going to see necessarily those operators because it's not going to be equipped to handle it. Management Studio gets released every month separately from SQL Server, so you want to make sure you're on a relatively new release. And then the goal of Microsoft is that any OS, any edition of SQL Server, the same code. So the demos I showed, I was running on Linux because, like I mentioned, I didn't have a SP1 instance handy because of my VM rollback. So any edition, developer, web, Express, enterprise, all the same code. You might have some differences in management. So if you're a DBA, you have to be aware of the differences. But from a developer perspective, you're writing the same code against each platform. And with that, I'll take some questions, and I see I have one. SQL Server Reporting Services provides a report viewer for including reports in WinForm and older ASP.NET. Does Microsoft Report Viewer include a 2016 support a report viewer for ASP.NET MVC Core? I've got no idea. You're talking to the wrong person on that one. If you can't find it, it probably doesn't exist, but I'm not 100% sure. What happened to BIDS or SQL Server Developer Tools in SQL 2016 SP1? So all of that stuff has been wrapped into SQL Server Data Tools. So SQL Server Data Tools releases at almost the same cadence as SQL Server Management Studio. There's some back and forth between those things. Also, if you're a developer that likes to work on other platforms or likes to use a Mac, you should also stay tuned to any announcements coming out of Microsoft. They may have some interesting things going forward that I can't talk about yet, but stay tuned. There's gonna be some neat stuff going forward. The platform is kind of changing rapidly, but the tools, the tooling's getting a lot better, I have to say. Any other questions? Name of the free tool to see XML. That's just SQL Server Management Studio. So I was using SQL Server Management Studio. The tool I was asking about was, or mentioning was Sentry One Plan Explorer, which is free and available at sentry1.com. And can you please explain once more the difference between Enterprise Edition and Standard from a Windows failover point of view? So I'm going to talk about two different things here. I'm going to talk about failover cluster instances, which is our traditional, and Alan Hurt's going to shoot me for using this terminology, but active-passive cluster where you have one SQL server with shared disk that can run on either of those nodes. That you could always do in Standard or Enterprise Edition. That hasn't changed at all. The difference is with always-on availability groups. With Enterprise Edition, you can have multiple databases in your availability group. You can scale out up to 9 nodes in your availability group, and a number of other features that are enhanced. With Standard Edition, you can have one database in each availability group. There's no limit on the number of availability groups you can have, and you can only have one secondary. The other big difference there is on Enterprise Edition, you can scale out your reads. So you can have readable secondaries. There's no concept of readable secondaries in Standard. It's just an idle secondary. You can, however, just like you could with database mirroring, use a database snapshot, and those are now supported in Standard Edition if you're on SP1. However, then you do have to license. And somebody asked for my contact info, and sure, I'll pop back to that slide. And just my email is joey@dcac.co if you need to find me. If you need anything, though, the easiest way to reach me is to hit me on Twitter. I am @jdanton.
Actually, I got a question, Joey. Just when you mentioned Alan Hurt, is it always on with a space, or is there no space between always on?
There is no space. But that changed at some point. So originally there was no space, then there was a space, and then there was no space again. Thanks, Microsoft Marketing. I love you. I have great friends there, but man, they make some interesting decisions sometimes.
Brilliant.
So
we're getting
cool.
lots of thank yous and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. If there are no other questions, I'm good. If anybody has any other questions, email me or hit me up on Twitter or look at my blog or whatever. So, yeah. Thanks, everyone. I had a good time.
Thanks, Joey. You did a wonderful job, and we'll sign out now. If there's any questions sent to us, we'll forward them to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And I'll get you the deck right after. Bye.
Bye.